Just because you're one of the biggest bands in the world doesn't mean your peers have to like you. You'll never guess how many rock stars weren't made for loving Kiss. There aren't many musicians who have had the longevity of Kiss. However, British rockers The Who continue to beat on, even if they've had their breakups and drama along the way. The groups, though, couldn't be any more different, as The Who's guitarist Pete Townshend told Hazy Rock. Townshend called Kiss a very American phenomenon, explaining how it would have been unlikely to see a band like them come out of England or Europe at the time. He also wasn't a big fan of how they dressed and presented themselves to the world. He said, "The early years of Kiss were difficult because there was sort of a parody of rock inherent in what they were doing. And also, that business of wearing disguises. Not quite sure about it. You know, I think I'd have to do an academic study to try and work out what's really going on there." Despite Townshend not being sold on Kiss, Gene Simmons admitted The Who was one of his band's primary influences when starting out, not only musically, but also visually. Appearing on MSNBC's Morning Joe in December 2020, Simmons explained how The Who's live shows enthralled him because of the performance aspect of it, including Townshend smashing his guitars on stage.
It's showmanship, stagecraft.
He added how he thinks the theater of rock and roll is lost on modern-day musicians. Maybe Simmons really loved The Who's disastrous performance that ended with Townshend's hair on fire. Even though Aerosmith doesn't slather on the face paint, you'd think they share a kindred rock and roll spirit with Kiss, as there's a similar swagger and rebellious nature to the music. To that, however, Aerosmith singer Steven Tyler would say, "Dream on." In 2012, Tyler appeared on WHPT Tampa's The Cowhead Show and referred to Kiss as a comic book rock band. He said, "A Kiss lick and a Joe Perry lick, two different worlds. And I, sometimes, depending on the time of day, get offended. I hear that and go, it's all right, but do they really mean it? And what's this all about?" And that's why I think Aerosmith has been around forever. We really do take ourselves seriously. Beyond not being into their overall aesthetic, Tyler explained how an incident between an Aerosmith roadie and Kiss's crew soured him on the group when they were on tour together in the 70s. However, he added that he's on good terms with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley these days. Addressing Tyler's comments on Rockline, Stanley admitted that he liked Tyler and Aerosmith, suggesting that Tyler simply could have been talking trash about Kiss to promote an album. Stanley did recall, however, a co-headlining tour in 2003 where Tyler insisted on Aerosmith going on last. He said, "So I have to say that seeing him go on after us, to play to an underwhelmed audience and see people walking out, didn't feel too bad to me." Before Guns N' Roses played the 1988 edition of Donington's Monsters of Rock Festival, which ended in tragedy as two people died in a crowd surge during the band's set, frontman Axl Rose was asked if he saw any similarities between his band and the other groups performing, such as Iron Maiden, Megadeth, and Kiss. In regards to Kiss, he said,
"I think the only thing that we have in common with Kiss now is that, they like to make money and they like girls."
Beyond that, though, he didn't think they were on the same page.
Basically, their music's like second fiddle to their other desires. Our music comes first.
In 2011, the topic of Guns N' Roses was raised in MusicNews.com's interview with Gene Simmons. He said, "Guns N' Roses could have been the best band in the world, and the reason they're not is because of Axl Rose." He went on to add that he believed the band's problems, in terms of the highly publicized drug and alcohol scandals, were all Rose's fault. When asked what Rose could have done to avoid it all, Simmons said, "A good beating would have helped." Axl isn't the only member of Guns N' Roses who dislikes Kiss. Much like Kiss, Guns N' Roses' six-string slinger Slash possesses an unmistakable appearance. Fans often spot his top hat and sunglasses before he even has a chance to launch into the opening riff of Sweet Child of Mine. One would think that Slash's look and affinity for classic rock would make him a Kiss fan, but it's the furthest thing from the truth. In a 1990 interview with Musician, Slash spoke about his early days hanging out with Guns N' Roses drummer Steven Adler and how Adler put on Kiss albums while they'd mess around with a guitar and amplifier. While the moments with Adler ignited his interest in starting a band, Slash said he always hated Kiss. In Paul Stanley's autobiography, Face the Music, A Life Exposed, the Kiss singer discussed how he met Slash before Guns N' Roses became an internationally acclaimed band. He praised the group, but admitted his disappointment to hear Slash's offensive remarks about both Kiss and him throughout the years. Stanley explained how Slash reached out to him one time to see if Stanley could help him acquire guitars, but he told him to get lost. That said, he and Slash were on better terms as of 2006. In a 2014 interview with Rock Hard, Slash confirmed Stanley's story. while also saying Stanley was supposed to produce an album for Guns N' Roses back in the day, but they weren't really interested in his input and only agreed to his involvement because Adler was a fan. In a retrospective chat with Gibson TV in 2020, Black Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi discussed the various highlights of his illustrious career as a globetrotting musician and some of the famous bands he has shared the stage with over the decades. Iommi spoke fondly of Van Halen and recalled a humorous touring story of them seemingly copying everything that Black Sabbath did. When it came time to talk about Kiss, though, Iommi wasn't quite as generous.
Kiss, on the other hand, well, I don't know what happened there, because we didn't sort of get on with them.
He then went on to laugh and tell a story about when he and his bandmates decided to make a tiny alteration to Kiss's name on a promotional sign.
And we found a P and took the K off and put piss on it. So it was like...
It doesn't appear as if the groups hung out together after shows either, since Black Sabbath apparently couldn't tell the actual Kiss band members apart from their road crew.
And we used to see them at the airport, and we never knew who they were because they'd always have the makeup on. We couldn't tell if that was the crew or the band.
How many Grammys has Carlos Santana won? The answer is a lot. An undeniable legend in the world of music, his opinion carries mighty weight among his peers, pundits, and fans. However, it's unlikely that Kiss will ever want to hear him speak about them again, especially after Santana took aim and blasted away in 2005. According to Contact Music, Santana chose to take shots at Kiss, specifically Gene Simmons, for a presumed lack of musicianship. He said, "He's not a musician, he's an entertainer. A musician is Coltrane, Bob Marley. Kiss is Las Vegas entertainment, so he wouldn't know what music is anyway. That's why he wears all that stuff. A musician doesn't need the mask and the mascara, so there's a difference between an entertainer and a musician." Simmons, who is often regarded as the least popular member of Kiss, isn't renowned for letting bygones be bygones. He waited a few years, but he got his licks in on Santana in 2009. Appearing on Fox 5 News live in Las Vegas, Simmons took the opportunity to throw shade at Santana as an onstage performer. He said, "It's time for us to go out and show the little boys how the big boys do it. I'm sick and tired of these bands like Carlos Santana looking at his shoes and thinking that's a rock concert." Also worth mentioning, since the irony is too good to omit, is that Santana is the one with a Las Vegas residency these days. The Sex Pistols and Public Image Limited vocalist John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, proves to be punk rock to the core, never shying away from speaking his truth or sticking it to the man. Considering the strong DIY nature of the bands he has associated himself with over the years, it was always highly unlikely that he would align with the values of the commercial juggernaut and merchandise peddling machine known as Kiss. Lydon, though, is able to separate Kiss's music from the actual people involved in the band, as he mentioned to Jam in 1996. He explained that he's pals with Gene Simmons, and they even hit the town for a night out when he was in Los Angeles. Lydon added that he doesn't like Kiss's music at all, much like a lot of other artists, but he's able to look past that and have personal relationships with the band's members. He said, "What people do musically is up to them. I can still deal with them on a one-to-one basis." In a 2023 interview with Spin, Lydon expressed a belief that he finds many bands are, quote, "selling you an image that's false," and brought up Kiss for specific criticism. He said, "I've met the Kiss lads. They're all right. You know, without the makeup, there ain't much going on." In the 70s, Blue Oyster Cult toured with Kiss, and former drummer and founding member Albert Bouchard remembers the events that transpired all too well. In an interview with the podcast Full in Bloom, Bouchard discussed several experiences with Kiss and the band's general behavior on tour. In regards to Paul Stanley, he recalled spending time with him after a show and thinking to himself,
"Wow, this guy really thinks he is God's gift. Give it a break, man. Don't tell me how great you are."
Stanley's partner in crime, Gene Simmons, was just as full of himself, according to Bouchard.
Just felt the need to act superior, to sound superior or something. I don't know. What is that? Why do people do that?
That being said, Bouchard couldn't help but laugh at an incident in which a roadie called Simmons by his real name, Chaim Witz. Reportedly, Simmons didn't appreciate it and chased the roadie throughout the building for retribution. When Bouchard asked Simmons what his problem was, since it's his given name after all, Simmons brushed him off. Nonetheless, Bouchard giggled about it all, even as he called Simmons a jerk. For many fans, the quintessential Kiss lineup remains the original dream team of Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Peter Criss, and Ace Frehley. A major part of the glory years in the 70s, Frehley departed the band for the first time in 1982 before returning in 1996. and then leaving again in the early 2000s. Expectedly, there's a lot of complicated history here. During a 2024 interview with Chaos Scene, Frehley was asked about Kiss's farewell tour, and how he, Chris, and former Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick weren't a part of the final show at Madison Square Garden in any capacity. Frehley explained how confusing the entire situation was, since he had heard how positively Simmons and Stanley had spoken about Chris, Kulick, and him. Frehley said, "They were saying, we called Ace, we called Peter, and they're going to be on stage with us and play a few final songs, Brotherhood and all that bullshit. And then the last month, once the show was sold out and they didn't need our help to sell out any more tickets, Paul Stanley went on the Howard Stern show and said, well, if Ace and Peter got up on stage with us, you might as well call the band Piss." Needless to say, Stanley's comments annoyed Frehley, who declared he wouldn't have appeared at the final show even if he'd been invited. He also expressed how he believed himself to be a much better musician than Stanley on all fronts, though adding that he was cool with Simmons.